It's going. Like the rest of you, we're trying to make sense of this crazy thing that we call life. I'm RJ.
I'm Khalil.
And welcome to Try Not to Overthink It. I'm a licensed professional counselor.
I'm a licensed social worker.
Every day we find ourselves discussing many different topics, ranging from trending news to the state of our society as a whole. You name it, we've probably talked about it. After many heated debates, we decided to expand and share our conversations with you, hoping to give you a perspective from a therapist and a social worker, and hopefully get your input. If this is your first time here, we want to thank you for stopping by and checking us out, and we hope that you'll stay and be a part of the conversation. So today, we're going to continue our conversation on racism. We talked about that last episode, and so we're going to continue that episode today. We're going to continue forward with that topic today in this episode. That is something that is very serious for both Khalil and myself, because if you are, as you cannot see, for those of you who are listening to us rather than seeing us, watching us, we are both African American. And being African American, there are certain hurdles that we have to overcome in life, both professionally and personally. And so that is something that we definitely wanted to talk about with you guys. So what I've seen, especially in today's society, when you have conversations of racism, about racism with people, a lot of people tend to think that racism is like a malicious act that one person or an institution is doing to another person, or a group of people who are part of a marginalized population. But that's not true. Racism has morphed and changed and shape-shifted from malicious acts and malicious beliefs and malicious things and ways to more institutionalized things, where it's gone past just judging someone based off the color of their skin and language and religious preference, to being more so of a thing where we start to place hurdles that people have to jump over in order to just have basic human rights, basic equality. And it's become so ridiculous to the point to where people just don't have access to the same level of healthcare. Right. People don't have access to the same level of education. People just don't have just basic equality that other people, take for granted.
Look, we're going to touch. We need to touch on Flint, Michigan, for sure, because that situation is still going on. People really think that because the government's providing water and some other things. Well, how come the water is still not drinkable? They've still been running tests, and the water is still not provided to those Flint, Michigan residents at a high quality standard. Water has to be brought in from elsewhere. What I'm saying? People are still talking about that right now. So that should show you about some of the racial inequalities that are still going on systematic. Matter of fact, I was just talking to somebody about redlining. And when it comes to the housing market, we know how crazy the housing market is right now. Feds just hiked the interest rate. But still, there are different communities that are not available for people of color. And I'm not just talking about African Americans, I'm about people of color, period. They're locked out of those communities. The realtors still do that same work today to keep certain people out of certain communities. People act
Most definitely.
Everything went away in the 40s and 50s. Are you crazy? No, it's still going on today. So those are the systematic things I believe you were touching on earlier. And we didn't get to talk about that last show. I didn't get to talk about, living with a biracial child. My daughter's biracial. And I was telling to a brother the other day, white women really don't understand the struggle until we sit down with them and allow them in the head of an African-American male. And that's the reason why it's a high percentage. I don't have the statistics memorized right now, but it's a high percentage of biracial couples end up in divorce or separation. People don't really understand that.
Well, that's where it goes back to, like I was saying last episode, of a conversation of education.
Conversation of education. Yep.
By sitting down and educating people about your struggle. Because a lot of people, their thought process in things is, if it doesn't directly impact me,
right,
I'm not truly concerned about it. And it's not until something, I got these blinders on where I'm only focused on the things that are impacting my lane of traffic. And if it's not impacting me or people that I know, if it's not hitting home, if it's not me and mine, then I'm not truly concerned about it. And things like racism only continues if people just turn to look the other way and just pretend that it doesn't exist, because it does. Simple things like education, like my niece, for example. My niece she is 7. She's in private school. So she's in private school. My sister pays, I think, just shy of $800 a month for private school tuition. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the demographic of her classroom, there's not a lot of people that look like her in that classroom.
Right.
So the best way that I can equate it is the former mayor of New Orleans, Mitch, I think his name is Mitch Landrieu, he launched a racial justice initiative to uncover and confront issues of racial inequality. And so one of the things he talked about, when they were interviewing him and just different things, was he talked about opportunity and about how talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not.
Right.
So, there are certain things that, as a person who is a member of a marginalized population, that you already have to overcome. People are going to judge you based off the way you look. People are going to judge you based off of your religious preference. Right. People are going to judge you based off of who you love, or how you love, or how you worship, how you speak. People are going to judge you. But then you compound that with having less access to quality instructors,
right.
With less access to advanced technology, textbooks, tutors, because again, everyone knows that if you have access to better resources, you tend to be more successful in whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Right. So
if you're an athlete and you have access to the cutting edge technology in regards to rest and recovery, you have the best, in equipment, the best personal trainers, the best nutritionists. Guess what? You're going to be head and shoulders above anybody else competing against you.
Right.
So when you see things like that in regards to education is a foundational block that our society is built upon. That education it's a gateway where it opens doors to other facets of life, where a child is automatically starting off at a deficit because of the fact that I don't have access to the same resources to people who don't look like me. That's a problem.
Right.
And I mean, and like you said, it domino effects into things like housing. It domino effects into things like getting a job. It dominoes effects into things like healthcare. People don't really take that into account because it's not me. Right. I got mine. I got my health insurance. My kids got the best education. I got my career. But then what about the next person? The person standing next to you.
Right.
Well,
we saw that in the pandemic. In the pandemic, kids were supposed to be going to school from home, right? A lot of people were struggling because they did not have access to Wi-Fi. People forget about that. There was people who did not have homes that were equipped with Wi-Fi. So they had to try to do other things. Well, come to this location so you can get free Wi-Fi and access to the schools for the students through the school. That's, when people look at that, it's like, well, wow, I thought everybody had Wi-Fi now. I thought everybody had that. No, not everybody has that.
Those are things that people take. Those are things that people take for granted. People have started like the pandemic. For all the bad that it did, the pandemic did a lot of good too, because it showed that we're where we are as a species in regards to how little we cared about each other. One, and then two, the fact that there was a huge disparity in certain resources like, Wi-Fi. Where again, like you said, You and I, we've had internet. We don't even think about it. I remember internet when it used to be dial-up, where you had to disconnect your phone and plug it into your computer. And now you can access internet anywhere. So most of us take it for granted, not understanding that there are people who are less fortunate than ourselves that struggle, and can barely survive. So to have a luxury such as 5G internet, Wi-Fi, to be able to do homework assignments, I got to choose between putting food on my table and keeping a roof over my head versus having a luxury such as internet. So those children who didn't have the internet, guess what they did? They were behind when school started going back to normal, because again, the lessons that they should have gotten, they didn't have. And so
where their parents had to run and scramble to try to get them to someone's house who had it, doing a lot of extracurricular things, right? Remember, we had problems with childcare because, hey, work doesn't stop just because of the pandemic. A lot of people still had to go to work, myself and you included. We still had to go to work. We had clients. I had to go see people face to face. Case management never stopped for me. I'm on the phone. I'm going to people's houses. I caught COVID, going to people's houses. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, work didn't stop for me. I was blessed that my child doesn't live with me, but I still had to send support. I still had to do things like that. So work didn't stop for most people who were lower income. Our work didn't stop.
Life as itself as a whole didn't stop. And so in order for things like racism to end, it's just like with any bad idea. In order to get rid of a bad idea, you have to replace it with a better one.
Right.
You have to sit down and have these conversations where people are sitting down and discussing things and truly hearing each other. Right. Because if we're just shouting at each other, guess what? Nobody's listening. Nobody's receiving anything. If all we're doing is pointing out, you did this to me and this is your problem and it's not my problem and da-da-da-da-da-da, the cycle continues. And so that's where we're at now, where, again, there has been a lot of progress in regards to combating racism. Because, again, people are becoming more educated about how things are not fair. Right. People are becoming more cognizant and more empathetic to the plight of the next person. And that's where, like I said, for all the bad things that COVID did do a lot of good things, because it caused people to recognize, like, holy crap, that's not fair and that's not right. Like I was watching a documentary where they were talking about, people, that there was a higher rate of, more fatalities resulting in COVID for, people of the minority groups, because of certain things like, the meters that were checking for oxygen level, and how that the meter was calibrated for people with a lighter pigment skin tone. Right. Because it sends light, I guess, through your finger or something, from what the lady was explaining. And so if you have a darker pigment, it's not going to go through your finger as well. So it gives off a false, reading that, hey, you're highly oxygenated, when in reality it was not. And so, again, it forced people to sit down and have those conversations, because we realize, like, we're not doing things to the best of our capabilities in order to make sure that we're providing adequate care to everybody. Service.
Right. Since we live in work in the medical field, people don't realize that's why I do go to an African-American physician, and my nurse practitioner is also of another race. You know what I mean? She's of color. I have to go to someone who understands that my genetics are a little bit different than Europeans. Not saying we're different when it
like
comes
a different species or something.
Different species, but because I have situations where most of my father's side, they're thinner people. You know what I mean? But they have a high rate of diabetes. These aren't men that are overweight. My mom's side, the people are a little more overweight and they don't have diabetes, but they have high blood pressure, right? So I need to make sure that I'm not being grouped into the same statistics as some other Europeans, and you're trying to pass me off medication that's not good for me. People don't realize there's some blood pressure medicine that reacts differently on different people.
Yeah.
You get sick by taking certain blood pressure medicine.
You sure will.
Yeah. And if you're pre-diabetic, a lot of people can change their diets before they have to go on certain medications that are pushed by the physicians. It's good for you to talk to people about your genetic history. It's good for you to go get a colonoscopy. It's good for you to go do certain things, but also have a doctor of color, in which people, I know it seems, well, I'll go to any doctor as long as you go to the doctor, right? Yeah, that's good too, as long as you go to the doctor. But why don't you go to a doctor of color so they can actually tell you about certain things genetically that you're for high risk for, just because of your genetics, period.
Because a lot of people don't understand that you depending on your race or your ethnic group, you can be predisposed to certain medical afflictions such as diabetes, high cholesterol, hypertension. There's even certain foods that I was reading about. There are certain foods that, because of whatever your ethnic group is, it can affect you a certain way.
Right.
So it's things of that nature where, again, we not only have to educate other people, but we have to educate ourselves. And so, because the more you educate yourself, you can then be a force multiplier where you can educate other people about what goes on with you. Because again, a lot of people take things for granted. They, like for a lot of people, they personally don't experience things. They personally aren't affected by something. They tend to dismiss it as it's not that big of a deal. Because I've had that conversation with, coworkers, colleagues, people I was going to school with, where we talked about things, because both you and I went to HBCUs. Right. So in going to HBCUs, you sometimes meet people who are not necessarily from your ethnic group. And so I remember being in graduate school, and we were taking a class on counseling culturally diverse populations. And one of my classmates, who happened to be Caucasian, was like, I don't understand why African American people are still going on about racism. Not racism, slavery. Why slavery is still such a big deal to African American people. What happened? We all know what happened. It was bad. I'm not saying that it was okay, but I'm just not understanding why, African American people can't just get over it.
Right.
And the thing is, like I had to explain to her, what you have to understand in situations such as, slavery, the slave trade.
Right.
We as African American people, African people at the time, and then we slowly became African American people. But we as, African people, my ancestors were bought and sold as though we were property. Right. We were less than a pair of shoes. We weren't even
commodity.
We were a commodity.
Exchange, yeah.
We were not. We weren't human beings. And so it's easy for you to say, oh well, just get over it, not really understanding when you didn't have to experience that. Your ancestors didn't experience that. So
and also, you should have shared with that person also the legacy that's left behind is still here. A lot of the Ivy League schools were built off of slave money. People don't know that. All up and down the East Coast, Brown, Princeton, all those, they had a lot of investors who got their wealth from the slave trade.
Yeah.
And put it into Ivy League schools. That's why, hey, look, a lot of them don't even want us there. But you have to really educate people because they don't know that. But they can go look it up. You can Google it, but they wouldn't want to Google it. You get what I'm saying?
Because
their little secure bubble.
Because what happens is people tend to build this, like you said, a bubble. They build a bubble around themselves where, the things that I believe, there's no way that I or anybody I'm associated with was a part of anything negative or bad.
Right.
And so, like you said, there, the history, and this is something we're going to talk about, at a later time in regards to generational curses. Right. The same way that eye color, height, weight, hair color, certain physical afflictions, even some mental afflictions can be passed on genetically.
Right.
To the next generation. Things like hate and racism and ignorance can be passed on to the next generation as well, to the point to where you doom yourself to repeat it. and continue the cycle. Because again, if all you know is a certain way of thinking or a certain way of being, guess what? How are you going to do anything any different? Because it's normalized to you. And so when you have things like when you come into this world out of your mother, right? You're not born understanding that because someone looks different than you, they're less than you.
Right.
You know, that's taught to you. And the only way to unlearn things that are taught to you is to be presented with alternative information and in a way that you're willing to receive it.
Right.
Because the you know, like, and you know, we've talked about this, a conversation of education. When you sit down and you're willing to receive anything that someone tells you, right? You know, because the way a conversation works is, you know, transmit and receive mode. While you're in transmit mode, I'm in receive mode. And when I'm in transmit mode, you're in receive mode. But when you come into an interaction with someone and you're both on transmit mode, guess what? Nobody's receiving anything.
Nobody's receiving
so
anything. Right.
We, as members of a marginalized population, have to understand that for some people, this is all they know. So to come in and try to cause what we talk about in psychology is called a paradigm shift, which is a complete reverse of their reality. You know, we have to be patient. We have to be understanding that it's not going to occur overnight.
Right. But we still have to be proactive.
You got to be proactive.
Because people will sit there and be like, well, I'll wait. No. Educate. All right. Start participating. Start going out there. Be intentional about shaking up some of the stereotypes and being like, hey, this is not what we want to do.
Exactly.
Not all Black people want to live in the lower income neighborhoods. Not all Black people don't want to go to school. Not all Black people steal. Not all Black people want to gangbang or want to fight for. Because like a lot of people think, well, imitation is the best form of flattery. And you see young white kids with their pants sagging. Like, you know, I remember living in a lower income area and there being some white families in there, right? And a lot of those white families, they really didn't want, like, some of their kids assimilated into the culture and they would wear some pants that were a little baggy or whatever like that. But that parents really didn't like none of that. Parents didn't really like Black people. Because I had a couple white friends growing up when I was in lower class neighborhoods, right? And we never shamed him because sometimes the dude, he did have a little slang in his talk and stuff like that. But he had a harder life than I did. You know what I'm saying? He had a real hard life. And the funniest thing is, he wanted to get out of that situation. So when I see these rich kids walk around with their pants hanging and they acting like they gangbangers and wearing flags and doing all that type of stuff, people say imitation is the best form of flattery. But I also want to say that's not reality, man. Nobody wants to live like that. My mother got out of a low-income neighborhood so fast, my head spun. As soon as she got a better job, it was on. She's like, we got to go. Because she understood what it does to you. And that oppression from being in that type of environment, gets passed down. That's a part of that generational curse. Yeah, because I mean, like when you watch the girl from Dr. Phil, the Catch Me Outside girl, I can't remember what her name is. Right, yeah. You know, it's like it was like we're when you listen to her mother speak, I'm like, you didn't learn how to talk like that from your moms. From your mom. You learn how to talk like that and act like that because you're watching what you think is cool, which happen to be African American people. Now, again, that is not that is not a true representation of all of us. Now, some people do speak like that. Some people do speak like that. But again, what happens, the way our brains work, is we tend to generalize a small sample size of a population to the entire population. And everybody acts like that. And everybody acts like that. No, we don't. No. So, for me, that is where, like I said, a conversation of education has to occur. And pointing out to people that, for me as an African-American man, there are certain, it blows my mind that people don't really realize that the struggle that we have to go through every single day as people of color, where we have to have conversations with our children of, when you go certain places, don't do certain things. When you're around certain people, don't do certain things. Right. When there are certain places because of the way you look, you can't go after a certain time. Yeah. Like, heck, there are certain places here where we live. We know. You're in Alabama.
there's certain places we can't go after a certain time. You're not allowed to be there.
You're a prime suspect if you are. People are like,
so
well, you must be here to start trouble, so we're gonna start trouble first.
Yeah, exactly. So those are conversations. Like, I was watching one of my coworkers put me on the show All American. It's a CW show about this kid that went from Crenshaw to Beverly Hills to play football. And so one of the episodes, him and his teammate got stopped by the police.
Right.
And so, he's explaining to the coach who's allowed him to move into the house, like, why didn't you have this conversation with him? Like, where I'm from, we have these conversations of, hey, you don't do certain things. You don't run. You don't do this. You don't do that, because these certain things will get you certain responses.
Right.
And so people don't understand, and I don't say that because I feel that, this is indictment on the police, because it's not. Because I work with a lot of police officers who, again, have been the most respectful, most caring, most loving people I've ever met in my life.
African-American police officers as well. We've done that too.
Exactly. So
right.
it becomes a situation where people don't understand the struggle that comes along with being a part of a marginalized population. They tend to kind of downgrade what we go through and what we experience. And I mean, to me, not really understanding that we're not asking for you for something that is life-altering or life-changing. We're asking to be viewed as peers and to be treated as equals.
Right.
And right now, there are so many hurdles and so many fences and so many things that we have to overcome that just don't make any sense, just for us to be on the same equal footing as people who do not look like us.
We have
people
to fight
who do not
harder.
We got to fight harder. Because not only do we have to fight against the stereotypes, but we have to fight against the societal issues, such as education, such as the access to resources, because that's what it's turned into, where there's a clear disparity gap,
right.
Not just small incremental. No, I'm talking about Grand Canyon sized gaps in academic success. Why is that? Because these group of people, they have access to things because they have the resources. Right. So they can do all these different things.
Resources is key.
Yeah,
access to resources is key. That's how you keep generational wealth.
Yes, exactly.
People don't get that. I didn't start off with $10,000 to invest. Some people have even more than that. I didn't start off with a family member that said, hey, I already had your college paid for.
Exactly. So those are things where people don't understand. People, throw the adage out there that life isn't fair. And you're absolutely right. Life is not fair.
Right.
But again, if we're supposed to be equal and we're supposed to be the same, and we're all supposed to be putting in the same and taking care of each other and loving each other, because I can't speak to how anybody else was raised and how anybody else was brought up. But the way I was brought up and the way I was raised was that we were all equal. We were all the same. And it's cool to espouse that, and it's sexy to say that, because that's the narrative nowadays.
Is that real? Is that
exactly
real? Is that reality? Look, that's the funniest thing, because I was watching an old show. Somebody had posted an old show of Louis Farrakhan going on. I forgot what talk show it is. I'm trying to remember if it was like Jenny Jones or something like that. But he was getting to speak to Caucasians. White Americans, about white America, about systemic racism, and about why Black people have to allow themselves to basically become incorporated and take care of their own people and not expect white America to take care of them. Like, there has to be a separation, right? Almost going back to kind of how they viewed things in the 60s, in saying that he was actually reiterating that, like, hey, in theory, we would all like to be like Martin Luther King and everybody get along in theory, but in all actuality and all reality, we have to kind of remain separate in order to rebuild our culture and to kind of start off, because we started off from down here. We had an unfair start by being slaves and coming to this country with a deficit, right? So he's talking to white Americans and they're not really willing to hear him out. But that also speaks to the point where, yes, I don't want to be divided. I think we can all work things through. But in all actuality, when it talks about reality, are we willing to give people of color, not just African Americans, are you really willing to give people a seat at the table, or do we need to do this separately? You know what I mean?
So as long as so in order for us to be successful, in order for us to get past a lot of the struggles that we go through, we have to have an equal say. We all got to be sitting at the table.
Right.
But again, in order for us to get to that point, people have to be willing to hear. You have to be willing to hear what you have to say when you sit down at the table, because it's cool. Like I said, it's cool to say, "Oh, I stand with you," and to protest and to take a knee right now because people are watching me. Right. Because we live in a day and age where a lot of people have this thing of fake love, where because it's cool, because I can get retweets and follows and likes, I'm with this. I'm with it. I'm down for the cause.
We saw it during George Floyd. Everybody was talking about, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. All lives matter and Black lives matter and everybody.
But then the moment that everything kind of died down, that energy was gone. That same energy, that same solidarity that everyone was talking about, that it just evaporated. And that's where, you know, for me, you know, and I talked about this in our last episode, Bernie Sanders. There's photographic evidence of Bernie Sanders marching and fighting with African American people for African American problems when he didn't have to. No, so for me, I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan, but I can respect the fact that it's documented evidence that this man has had decades,
of service.
longer than I've been alive, fighting for the equality of human beings, not just African American people, not just Hispanic people, not just Asian people, everybody. And so for me, again, I can't do nothing but respect that, because he picked up a fight and he picked up and he chose to continue to fight for something that didn't personally affect him, and kept that same energy the entire time. It wasn't just because it was cool, wasn't just because it was a popular thing to do. My man said, you know what? That's not right, and I'm not okay with that.
And I'm gonna stand up for it.
And so I'm gonna stand up for it, because in order for evil to triumph, the good man is to stand by and do nothing. And for too long, we've stood by and done nothing. We've said nothing because it didn't personally affect me. I didn't have no skin in the fight. I didn't have no dog in the race, because me and my family are good. Not understanding But are you though? Are you though? Because again, this is, if you always, you know, and this is a life lesson I was taught when I was a kid. You treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
You know, now I understand that, you know, and as a therapist, and I tell my clients this, and I tell my coworkers this all the time, what you put into an interaction is what you can expect out of it. I always lead with respect, because in the words of my man, Kevin Gates, I lead with respect because I command it in return. I'm gonna lead with that respect and that love, because the only way that you can combat hate is with love. You can't combat hate with hate. You can't fight fire with fire, because again, the fire is not going anywhere. You can't battle a flood with a flood, because again, the water's not going anywhere. The only way that you can battle hate is with love. Love has to be like medicine. You know, for both Khalil and I, we work in the psychiatric field. So when you have symptomology that has begun to manifest in someone, what do? You manage that symptomology with medication. If that current dosage of medication doesn't work, you up the dosage, or you change the medication.
Right.
So you keep as the symptom escalates, you escalate. And so it's the same thing with love. As you start to manage and you start to educate people and share, you know, your experiences, your life experiences, with other people who don't look like you, who aren't from the same places you are, who don't speak the same languages you speak. Again, you're not always going to meet people who are going to be willing to receive the information that you're sharing with open arms. Right. You know, you're going to meet those people who have their walls up, because again, you're challenging my state of being right now. You're challenging what I know. You're challenging my reality right now. You're trying to tell me that the way I think, the way I was raised, the way I believe things to be is completely wrong.
Right.
And you expect me not to feel some type of way. But again, being patient, and like my man Khalil said, being proactive and not giving up and not being disheartened and not feeling like it's not, and being hopeless and not feeling like it's not going anywhere, eventually you keep sharing that love, you keep loving on that person, eventually those walls start to come down. Right. And they start to become more receptive, because again, one of the things that happens when you present information to people will either go and investigate for themselves.
Right.
Because you just drop that jewel on them. They're like, you know what? Let me go look into this.
Let me look at he's talking about something.
Or if he's lying.
Right. Because most of the time they think you're lying anyway, so that's why
exactly.
They'll investigate. Right.
So my thing is, like I tell people all the time, check the internet. The internet is undefeated. There's a plethora of knowledge that's out there that all you got to do is do a Google search, and you can check facts for yourself. And so again, provide people with reading material, because I do that as well. When I have a client that doesn't want to take medication, because medication won't do this and I print out reading material for the client, and we sit down together and read over it. So you can see that I'm not trying to flim-flam you. I'm not trying to
side effects, or if there is any side effects, and the things you can expect. Well, that's the same thing that I was talking about earlier, having a biracial child. Me and her mother had to have a sit down because my child's Black. No matter what, don't matter if she got curly hair, light skin, she's still Black. She can't pass as, any other race, except for maybe Spanish, but she can't pass for a white child. She's not.
Nope.
She's Black. We had to go through that early. So every time I would sit down with her, even after we separated, is just to explain that being an African American, you will have an automatic stereotype. There's stigmas. You will have extra stress on you that I have to be better than other people. When I'm in school, I have to perform better than the other races. Because if I don't, then they're going to try to stereotype, stigma, say that I have a mental health issue, say that I'm slow, ADHD, whatever that case is. You actually have to go through that as an African American. The stress that I have as an African American male, it's different dealing when I was dealing with Caucasian women. You have to have that sit down. My stress is different. It's a lot different. You might not be able to help me.
Your reality is different.
Yeah, you can't understand what I'm going through. You probably can't help me. And you have to say, and it's rough to say that stuff to them unless they've grown up in a lower income family and had other types of stuff stacked against them, and they still can't understand what it means to be in your skin.
Well, I mean, it goes back to, like I was saying before, in the last episode, who better than you to educate people about what goes on with you than you? Because a lot of people start going into that mindset of, it's not my problem. I shouldn't have to do that. Yes, you should. Right. Because again, you are a brand ambassador. And in being a brand ambassador, your job as a brand ambassador is to promote the brand, is to exemplify what the brand means, is to point out the merits and the strengths of the brand. And who better to educate other people about your brand, about who you are as a people than you? Because somebody who is coming from outside the population can't tell me about what I go through.
Right.
They're not going to know because they haven't had firsthand experience in the struggle. And so it's one of those things, like, prime example, like you were talking about your daughter. I remember watching that movie that Chris Rock made called Good Hair.
Yeah.
And, like, one of my coworkers, I remember we were sitting down and we were talking about it. And she was like, she was really enlightened by watching the movie. She said, because she didn't know the struggles that African-American women go through in regards to their hair. Both young African-American girls up to women, what they go through with their hair, the different types of hair that they have, the different textures of hair that they have, the different things that they go through because of the fact that, just something that we all take for granted, which is hair. There's different textures of hair, different curl patterns, just different things that go into things such as hair. So if something simple and innocuous that we just take for granted, such as hair, is a stressor, just imagine some of the more serious things, such as, the way people look at you when you go in the store. The way people treat you when when you pick up their wallet and you hand it back to them, the way that they thumb through the wallet to make sure all their money and their credit cards are there in your face.
Right.
Because I've had that happen to me before, where a lady dropped her wallet. She was riding a motorized wheelchair. I was in Walmart, and she's riding a motorized wheelchair, and she dropped her wallet. I walk behind her. I pick up the wallet. I tap her on the shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am, you dropped your wallet." Right in my face. She immediately starts going through the wallet. And
yeah. So what did you take out of it before you gave it back?
I'm like, okay. And to me, you have instances where when you get in line behind people at the grocery store and they immediately move their kids and their personal items away from you, like their right. purse and stuff away from you. And I'm like, I have money. I'm not trying to steal anything from you. I'm not trying to do nothing to you. I'm sorry. And I mean, I've learned to just not take things like that personally. Because again, that's most
I'm definitely
people
not going to internalize anything when I'm in public, especially when I see women, clutch a purse. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I remember when I was younger, my pants was hanging a little low. You know what I'm saying? I had the baggier clothes and stuff like that when I was younger. And so, I'd see people clutch a purse, and I'm working now. I worked construction for most of my 20s up to my early 30s. So I was always going to work. You know what I'm saying? Even as a drug addict, I used to work. I used to tell people, man, I work trash, clean up, all that. I've done all those things. I was still working. But you'd have people clutching their bags, especially white women, when they see me or walk on the other side of the street. I've been through that. And you know what? I learned not to internalize any of that because I know my self-worth. And like you said, I got my money. I'm going to pay for whatever I need to pay for when I'm at the grocery store. I might pay for yours if you treat me right. You know what I'm saying? I might bless you. You never know who I am, right? But at the same time, we internalize those things and we take it upon ourselves because what they're projecting, that hate that they're projecting, we start saying, well, damn, these people don't like me. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my color. There's something wrong with my hair. There's something wrong with my skin tone. All those different things go through our heads as African Americans. And it's hard not to feel like we're of lower worth, lower value, because society is indirectly saying that. Mm-hmm. And people don't get that. And that affects us mentally.
Emotionally. It affects you mentally. It affects you in all ways. It affects you mentally. It affects you emotionally. It affects you physically, spiritually, because you start to question your self-worth because right. You're like, what did I do? Because I know as a young man, I mean, like I definitely became one of those people where, and even now as an adult, where I just stay away from people, period. Right. Because people, I felt being, with my parents being military and my parents moving a lot and different things like that. Of course, being the new kid, I mean, I had that stressor of every few years had to relearn and make new friends all over again. But then also, as I got older and I started to realize that people looked at me differently, because of the color of my skin, not because of anything I said or anything because I physically done, they were already judging me. And right. So what I started to internalize was that maybe it's just better for me to just not associate with people at all. Yes. And so it's just better for me to just stay away from people as a whole because people are going to think one way about me, either because of the way that I talk or the way that I look, right. without even really giving me an opportunity to prove or disprove whatever they're thinking anyway. But again, when I started to realize that people think the way that they think and they believe the way they believe because that's the way they were taught, that by educating people, guess what? I give them the opportunity to be better because when you know better, you can do better.
Right.
And so when you know better, then to treat people differently because of the way that they look and to be open and to be empathetic and to be understanding of the things that they go through, you tend to be more quick to act on things when you see that they're wrong, even if they affect you or they don't affect you. And that's where I'm hoping that things continue to go, because as you know, as we're seeing now, people are becoming more cognizant of the fact that things are not right.
Right.
People are becoming more aware that there is an inequality and there is a disparity in regards to a lot of things because of race.
And I heard people say, "Oh my God, when I saw that George Floyd murder on TV, I'm like, they've been doing that since the beginning of America's time, ever since the 15th century. They've been killing people like that, you know, of color."
And it hasn't just been a police thing. It hasn't just been, the police have been doing that. No, you had vigilantes that were going out there. I mean, you look at the Klan.
Yeah, the
KKK was killing people like that. So
while
now
they're having picnics, they be hanging people while they're having picnics, watching people's bodies dangle from a tree. That was normal.
You know, literally the kindly shop owner would take your money Monday through Friday, and on Saturday they're burning a cross in your front yard.
On your front yard, talking about you got to move.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just become more readily, you know, visible because of the advances of technology. Right. Everyone's got a camera. Everyone's got a phone, so everyone can be
everybody's a reporter.
Everyone can be a reporter and drop breaking news. And so now it's become more readily visible, and so people can point out the inequalities in the way that people are treating them, like that lady in New York where the guy was out there bird watching, and she tried to make it into he was harassing her and her dog, and had he not been able to record that whole interaction. Just imagine how that would have gone for him.
Well, the police would have said it was on him. You know that.
Yeah,
he had her on video. Like, look at this lady lying in her, but you can tell she had some sort of personality disorder.
Yeah,
anyway.
she definitely did.
We're mental health professionals. I'm sorry to say, a lot of y'all, once I start seeing that type of stuff, automatically you start lying and making up stories and stuff like that. You need to be locked in a facility. You're a danger to yourself and others at that point.
Yeah. Because she literally attempted to weaponize the police against this man who was just bird watching. And again, had he not had a phone, had he not been recording the interaction, just imagine how things would have gone differently for him. And
she was entitled. She didn't like the fact he was telling her about her and her dog.
Yeah,
I think volumes to how entitled people are. Because I think people, period.
Yeah,
people are just entitled. You like, where in the world? You see black people doing crazy stuff too.
Because I think that for her, I think it was he was out there bird watching, and you're supposed to have your dog on a leash or something, and so he said something to her about having a dog on the leash, and then it went into this whole thing of you're harassing me and X, Y, and Z, and I'm just like, wait, what? He's harassing you where?
Delusional.
Man, you're the one that's getting loud on him. And then she put her best damsel in distress voice on when she called the police. And so, you know, it becomes a situation where, again, things are becoming more visible and people are becoming more cognizant and aware of the fact that, hey, stuff ain't right. Stuff is not fair. And we're not taking care of each other as we should. Because, again, we're all human beings. Right. We're all human beings first and foremost. It don't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what color you are, how you love, who you love, you know, how you worship. We are all human beings. And in being human beings, guess what? We got to treat each other with a certain level of respect and dignity.
And inalienable rights that you have as a human being.
Exactly.
You know, got to treat with respect.
Exactly, because again, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Exactly. If this was me, how would I want someone to treat me? If this was my mother, how would I want someone to treat her? This is my father.
Like the little boy, remember the little boy who was in the store with his dad, and I think it was in a Starbucks, and the girl said he stole her phone, and he had never gotten close to that lady. You know,
no, it was a no. That was in it was a hotel. It was a hotel lobby. Right. And
hotel lobby. That's
what happened was she had left her phone in, I think, a taxi cab or an Uber or something.
Something like that.
And he stole my phone. I mean, she literally attacked the young man, jumped on his back and everything.
Right.
And
trying to attack somebody physically over a phone. He didn't even know this lady. He never was close to her to steal her phone. So it just shows you how people can be. And she was actually someone who was Hispanic. She was a Hispanic American, which is really sad about the situation because she tried to use that to downplay her racist behavior.
Yeah, her profiling him.
Stole my phone.
He stole my phone. So she turned it into. I remember in the interview she turned it into that she wasn't racially profiling him because she's a minority as well, and you can't be racist against someone else when you're a minority too. Right. Ma'am, you profiled him because he was African American, and rather than just saying, "Hey, I apologize. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that." You know, I whatever trauma I cause this young man, because again, that causes trauma.
Exactly.
That causes trauma because
she's lucky that little boy actually was very mild mannered. Because I know some little boys that would probably threw hands on her. and it would have been something like, you know, I used to work at that little adolescent joint I worked at with some kids, was locked up, man. And look, some of them wouldn't even have thought twice about putting hands on that lady. Yeah,
they would have fought her just like she was a dude. Wouldn't have thought nothing like, oh, she's a woman. Let me stop. Let me just push her away from me. Nope. She'd have been blessed. She would have been blessed with a full ride scholarship to catch these hands university.
2 pieces and a biscuit might have laid her out and been like, yeah, it's not your phone.
and instead of just apologizing and attempting to move forward and trying to get past it, she continued to justify the behavior. And that's a big part of the problem too. Is
justification of the behavior.
Justifications.
That's what
we have to stop that. We have to stop that, because even like where you even have politicians that should know better than that. They justify the policing of neighborhoods with, oh, there's so much black on black crime. You know, this and
that's
that, and
increased police presence because of that, right?
And I was like, stop, because you're spinning a false narrative. You're spinning a false narrative, and we have to do better, because again, it is our responsibility as people who are putting knowledge out there to put out correct knowledge and put out the knowledge for people to be able to form their own informed opinion about things based off of things that are factually based, not based off of what I feel or what I think. And that's where a lot of people are getting it wrong, because again, that is what is continuing the cycle of hate, is the fact that we're putting out these false narratives, we're putting out these alternative facts and misinformations, if you will, in regards to race, in regards to equality, in regards to the separations and the disparities, and trying to downplay them and make them seem like it's not that big of a deal. And it is. It's not that big of a deal to you because you're winning. Right. But the moment you start losing, let's come back and have this conversation.
Exactly. Well, just like in 1992, we had the Los Angeles Riots, right? And there's many documentations and stories that they've done on it that obviously, because of the situation with the police presence, they wanted to make the narrative that all these black people were rioting and burning down stores and looting and rioting, when all different races were doing this. They even showed how they were recording. All right, the people who were recording everybody. But when it came to the news, they were only showing one group of people. Why would that? The people who were recording, the people from home and stuff like that, when you saw their own home videos, had everybody. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. Everybody was caught looting. But why you only see one black crackhead coming out with the TV and everybody like, oh, see, that's what they do. That's what they do. Well, that's what the actual media wanted you to see. Mm-hmm. And so society thinks it's only black crackheads looting and robbing everything.
No. And I mean, and to me, my thing is like, and I touched on this in the last episode. Protesting is the voice of the people who is the voice of the oppressed. Right. You know, and if people have issues with protesting, like I am not for the riot. When you start to impact daily life and business and people being able to make a living, and we're tearing stuff up. I'm not with that. I'm not with that, because that's not right. That becomes counterproductive at that point, because now people are being distracted by what you're doing instead of what you're saying. And so I again, I'm not okay with that. Like me just as an individual, I am not okay with the rioting and the tearing up of businesses and burning stuff. But I am on board with the peaceful protest, because again, when you peacefully protest, people tend to want to sit down and hear what you have to say as to why you're protesting in the first place. And if you have a problem with people protesting, ask them why they're protesting. Find out why they're upset. Find out why they're choosing to sit in or boycott a business and things like that. Find out why. Because I guarantee you, when you take the time to find out why people do something, always find the why. You know, and as a therapist, you know, that is something I always look for in a person, is the why. Because we're all motivated by different things. What's
the function of you doing that? Why?
Yeah. Why are you doing this? Because if I find your why, I can figure out how to get you to a different state.
A new intervention to get you where you need to go.
You know, get you to that next level. So for everyone's why is different. You know, like for you as a person that's employed, your why is, you know, showing up to work every day is the fact that I don't want to be on the street. Right. I got bills to pay. I got a family to take care of. You know, that why for pushing forward is the fact that I refuse to give up on my dream and refuse to give up on myself. So when a person is protesting, they get to the point where they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they say, enough is enough. I'm going to protest. Sit down and find out why people are protesting. Dig into the knowledge and find out why the people are saying what they're saying. Why are they sick and tired? Because being sick and tired didn't just come out of nowhere. It didn't just happen overnight. It didn't just happen the last 5 minutes, the last 2 years, the last 10 years. It's been a systemic thing for the past 400 plus years.
The people were tired.
They're tired.
It tells you in the Bible, right? During the times of slavery, when the Jews were held captive, right? And Moses was being brought up, and God said, I heard the cries of my people. All right, what happened? Rebellion after that. Rebellion happened after that. People have to understand we're only going to take so much. But the one thing, I know we're running out of time, the one thing I wanted to close with before we really got to closing time was a quote. The quote was from Nia Moeller. Nia Moeller was actually in Germany during the time Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party carried out the acts of violence and lawlessness against the populations, right? Innocent populations, right? And one of his quotes, and I believe Martin Luther King used it before too. It said, first they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I wasn't in the trade union. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Finally, they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. And that hit me hard when I thought about that we will sit back and watch people be persecuted.
And struggle.
And struggle. And we don't speak out because it's not us. That's this whole situation that's been perpetuated with racism. And I see it with the Hispanics right now. I had to correct somebody recently. I said, Hispanics are hardworking. I work construction. And when I was on the East Coast, most of my brothers that was working with me were Hispanic. And they were working hard, man. Hard for their families. All right. They weren't sitting there calling out when their back was hurt. They was coming to work, man. Because they wanted to take care of their families. They wanted to provide. And people talk bad about them. Because, there's 5 or 6 of them living in the house. Oh, man, that's how they do. Well, they're supporting and they're buying houses. They're buying property. Black people, why don't you do that? All right, if you got to live with your cousin. You don't want to live with your cousin. Sometimes you got to, right? Why don't you pool your money together with family members? Why don't you try to do some of those things that Koreans do, that other races do? Think about it, man. When we stand together and we do things and we're all come together as a people, things can be achieved.
Great things.
We forget about in the Bible the reason why the Tower of Babel was built because people came together.
Yep. Facts.
And we look at it in a negative way, right? But people came together in Babylon. All right, let's pull that. Let's all come together. But yet we watch other people be persecuted. We sit back because it's not us. And then when it's us and there's nobody to speak up, what happens, right? History's bound to repeat itself. Just give it time. So that's why we have to come together as a people. It's not about racism. It's about that separation. That's the real part of racism that I think people forget, that separation, the segregation. We have to come together in order to combat that. Like you said earlier with the love. That the direct correlation between love is a cure for hatred. It's a direct correlation. The more love, the less hate. It's a direct correlation. Yeah. And I'll let you close after that because we're already running out of time. People, man, an hour goes fast with y'all folks, man.
Yeah. So, again, we want to thank you guys for checking us out. If this is your first time here, we ask that you stay and join the tribe, join the conversations. And if you choose to stay, we greatly appreciate you. And we will see you in our next episode. You guys have a good one.
Peace.